Kia ora tātou katoa tō mātua tēra. Greetings to you, and it's an honour to be here. I want to acknowledge all those that are here today, and also to my parliamentary colleagues. I'm probably the young gun, or they sort of said to me that I went to last year to a meeting with other young students from the Otago University, and they called it the meeting of the young guns, young politicians, new politicians. They were all of the age of 24, 25, and I was the oldest. I'm in my 40s, so I felt like more like an old spear and in that place. But I want to acknowledge there's history and heritage that is here, so I'm probably the new sort of person that's here around politics as well. And it's quite interesting because I never aspired to be a politician, but what had happened is that when people say, why'd you get into it? Because my wife told me to, really, and she said I need to get out there and do something. And so the only way that it fitted into my head was the fact is that politics is leadership. And leadership is no different to whether you're the principal of a college, whether you're a kaumātua of a marae. It is no different, except it has certain responsibilities, and I think greater responsibilities, because you are shaping the lives, you're influencing, you're not only a lawmaker, but you're governing the country. And I think it's really important. I want to acknowledge the report, because it does talk about what types of leadership do we need in this country. That's absolutely important. I want to acknowledge this front cover. The reason why is when I look at this clothesline, it looks like my clothesline at home. And it reminded me that my wife keeps telling me, you've got to go and fix the clothesline. What I really like about this photo, because when we sit and look at it long enough, what you actually see is this backdrop. And it could be like when I was camping in the far north in a place like Whananaki, where Winston comes from. And the thing about this, when you think about the good old Kiwi holiday, is that the reason I like camping is that you go back to the basics. You go back to the things that are really important, such as relationships. I mean, my kids and our family, when we come together, there's a big group of us. And I remember one time when we were during their camping in the holidays, all the teenagers were together in the tent playing cards with a 99-cent packet of cards. And we reflected for a moment and we said to ourselves, isn't it really interesting? If you would calculate all the technology that these kids have, these young people have at home, it'd be in the thousands, and yet with a 99-cent packet of cards, they found a sense of that which was meaningful. I believe that what this report is actually trying to remind us of, what are the things that are absolutely important to us. What you're challenging us is with leadership, and with that leadership, obviously there are some real challenges for us ahead in how we address this. Winston talked about poverty. It's really interesting about that because when I reflect, I'm a first generation born of Pacifica migrant parents. And when they came from the beautiful island of the Cook Islands, they came here, and I was born in Ponsonby in 1966 in Old St. Helens Hospital. We were in a 3-bedroom, which is called house, and it was, the iron roof, and it was match lining, had no insulation. There were 22 of us in the house. I slept in the room with my brother, my uncle, their family. There was about 8 or 9 of us in the house. We had a toilet that was outside. We went and got the water to fill up the boiler that we pulled, and we put it together. And when I think about it, I had to go, even as a 3-year-old, up to 3 lamps in Ponsonby to get the shopping. When I think about the indicators of poverty that we use at the moment, I would think the fact is that, number one, my parents may have been locked up by SIPs because they left us home on their own. Number two, we've been seeing the fact is that we didn't have enough food. There were times in which all we had was a cup of tea and cabin bread in order for us to have our lunch and survive as well. So like Winston, I suppose, all of us, and our story is no different to many of you, we've experienced poverty. But what's the difference now? I think the conditions are different now. But the thing that I think that's really important is this. In my involvement in community-led development and where I've come from, in fact, the interesting thing is that after I gave my maiden speech at the end of 2010, I probably had more Labour MPs come up there and say to me, you're in the wrong party. And the reason why is that my dad was a labourer. He was a wharfie on the wharfs. He was a union delegate. He was a union rep. All my background, I'm an electrician by trade, did an apprenticeship. I did a theological degree, and I love the Isaiah 58 because I know that very well about the importance of that value of caring for other people around there. I pastored a church, I ran an NGO, and was involved in the NGO sector. And so in a sense, everything that I've done in one sense would have been leading. I know Trevor would say that to me. Alfred, you should be in the other party. But can I tell you this? I'm the first Cook Islander of Cook Island descent to be in Parliament to make a difference. I think what we need to do in the leadership that you're talking about is the fact is that if we put the politics to the side, and I think that's really what you want to say, whether it's this government or that government, You need to hold us to account also, first and foremost, as politicians. I've just come from the valedictory speech from Dr. Lockwood Smith. The final things that he said in his valedictory speech is this: MMP has been a blessing, but also a burden. A blessing in the sense that we now have the diversity represented of our country. The burden at times, though, is that now it's become about party politics rather than the House of Representatives. That means individual members of Parliament who represent the constituents and the people that they work with to truly make a difference. And here's the reason why I say that. With all the history and the heritage of all that's gone before, all the policies that we put together in the government, it's not just a one-sided approach that will work. I've been at the other end where I've seen policy been implemented, and there's been blockages at times because ministries, as you know of, can be the barrier. People can be the barrier. I believe that if we're going to make this work and address the issues of poverty, address the issues of housing, then it's a partnership that has to do with, yes, central government, yes, local government when it comes to housing, but also has to deal with communities and homes and families and even individuals. And here's some quick examples that I'll give just to round up my time here. We're involved in education in our local community over in Glen Innes and in Panmure. Decile 1A, that's the lowest that you can get because, as you know, for that decile rating. People said that this is a community that things could never happen. In fact, it was to the point where even the locals voted with their feet. There were over 2,200 kids that actually were schooled outside of our community because people felt the hope was outside. A small board of trustees at Point England Primary School came out one day into the car park, because that's where the real meetings happen, and said, why is it that we're failing our children? Why is it that we are seeing kids being educated outside? Out of that conversation, the long and the short of it, the community called for action. But they didn't just call for it, but they were willing to get involved. They wanted central government to make sure that they had the resources and shaped it together. And now what we're having after 10 years, and it was represented and was presented down here in government, here in the Beehive, where now we're seeing a Decile 1A school with the partnership of the community, of central government and the ministry together, now seeing the results of achievement go from below the bell curve now to Decile 5 ratings, where kids and their literacy and numeracy rates are achieving. 2,200 kids now have notebooks. But here's the thing that I think that's really powerful. $3.80 is what being paid by every single parent as their contribution. It's a third of the cost of that notebook. But here's the other thing that we put on to the parents as well, that if you want the best for your kids, then you need to become the best in who you are. So there's partnerships with our parents in education to ensure that they are also lifting their standard as well. Can I give you one more example just to finish off with? One of the things that I say for my Pacifica community is this, and Winston alluded to it. Even sometimes our own communities need to take some responsibility. I'm not to say that they're to blame, but what I say to my communities is this. There are times in which we need to shut the doors and close the curtains and say it's just us. And the reasons why is this. When there are outsiders in the room, we can misbehave. In other words, we'll romance the stone about all the things that are important about who we are and what we do. But sometimes those communities, our communities, my communities, need to stop for a moment and we need to ask this one question. What do we need to be responsible for? What are we going to take action? How are we going to respond? Once we answer that question, then we ask another question. Now, what will we ask help for? So when we go out of the room, we have two things. We know what we're responsible for, but we know what we need to ask help for. And that's where I think then we can make a great response as well. Just over here in Porirua, 2 weeks ago, a young Samoan woman in Porirua stood up and she said this. I'm 18 years old, and what I don't like is people saying that I'm underprivileged. I come from a working class family, and she said this. My father and my mother give me privilege because they love me, they care for me, they push me very hard, as Samoan mothers do. But she pushed me very hard, they pushed me hard because they want me to succeed. I don't like being labelled, I don't like being called because so other people can feel good about themselves. Because why? I want to take responsibility for me. And so can I say this with all respect? I think the conversation needs to be broader. I think the conversation needs to include the very people that we're talking about, and it needs to be robust. So yes, it involves the government and ensuring that there are policies that meet the needs, whether it be housing, education, health, and employment. But at the same time too, the challenge for us, the leadership that you're talking about will not come from us, should not come from us. They should come from 18-year-old Samoan girls in Porirua. They should come from young students over in Point England Primary School in Glen Innes who turned around and said this: what can we contribute to the cost of our notebook? You know what they came up with? They said, with all of the visitors coming to our school to see the good things that we're doing, what if we made them coffee? In 3 months, they learned how to be baristas. They had a coffee machine there, and I can take you there over to Point England Primary School, and for $3.20, you can buy a coffee from an 80-year-old who knows now how to make a flat white. And why? Because she knows that her contribution will means that's her part in playing and paying for her opportunity for success. And so the leadership we're talking about is not coming from us, does not come from you and me, but it comes from what are we doing and the ability to help them to succeed and to achieve as well. Look, that's not a political speech, that's probably an Alfred speech. But it's a speech that I want to say to you this, that I absolutely wholeheartedly believe, if you're going to hold us accountable, do not just hold us accountable as parties. Hold us accountable as individual members of representation down there in Parliament. Ask us what we're doing as individual representatives for our constituents. How are we implementing the policies? How are we working with our schools, our institutions, our working institutions? How are we finding out what the key issues are? And so that we can come back and we can tell you the stories about how we've also made a difference with what we have. Thank you.